sing something else, and then they would say, my name is Mary Lee, and I love to sing, and if there's any song that you want me to sing, I will be happy to sing it. And I said, and if he can't play it, and I don't know it, I'll just have to give you something else. And that's the way I went in there, and I did that for till I was 18 years old. I did it for 3 years.
So from 15 to 18, you did the USO stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's cool.
Yeah, and we went to all the hospitals. We went to the soldiers that had been wounded in this First World War, and they were in their 80s, but they were just wonderful. They would come over in their wheelchairs and says, "Can you give me a hug?" And I'd always say, "Of course I can," you know. And I was just a kid, you know, just
Sure.
15, but I really loved doing it because they were just so happy to have someone come in and sing a song that I wasn't really supposed to know, but I did because Mom and Dad had all these records that I learned to sing with, you know, and so
Right.
it was just, but it was a healing thing for me after losing my brother to go into the hospitals and see people, these young boys in wheelchairs, or you know, some of them had arms gone, some of them had shoulders gone, some of them couldn't see anymore, but just to be able to go in and sing to them was just a help to me to get through my brother dying,
Right.
you know. So I never talk about this. I'm sorry.
So at 18, okay, so you stopped singing in the USO.
Well, yeah. Well, if every once in a while I'd go out to one of the bases and sing too. A group of us would get together and go out and sing at the bases. But the war was over, and everybody wanted to kind of just let it go. They didn't want to be reminded of it by the songs we sang, you know, and that kind of thing. And so, and then I was going to college, you know, and
Now, where did you go to college?
Loretta Heights in Denver. And it was just an all-girls college. And so anyway, and my mom and I and Dad lived at the Catholic Charities on Fleet Street in Denver. And we had an apartment up on the 3rd floor, and Mom and I used to do the offices after they left at 5 o'clock. They would leave, and we'd go down and clean the offices and empty the trash. And my dad took care of the lawn and the furnaces. And then there was a building, an annex, a little behind us, and that belonged to the Catholic Charities, but that was rented out for people. That's how I met Frank. That's how Frank met me. And my mom and I used to, when they would have people coming and having dinners or a dance or something, they would have us come in and help serve the Cokes and the things like that. And then when they had dinners, sometimes Mom and I would do the cooking, and then we would finish cleanup, and then we would leave. But when I met Frank, he was a new agent in the FBI here in Denver, and they had a group that he was able to get in. One of his friends, or his name, I can't even remember his name anymore, but he was supposed to be in our wedding, and unfortunately he couldn't because my one bridesmaid was in the hospital with an appendectomy. So I could go on with this. You need to have a thing that you can, you know, put it on tape or something. But when we got married, so anyway, John came up to me. I was getting ready to leave, and he said, "Mary Lee, there's someone here that wants to meet you." And I said, "Oh." I said, "Well, they're waiting for me." There were about 6 kids. When we were going out with our friends, there might be 5 boys and 6 girls, or 6 boys and 5 girls, but we didn't date. We just went as a group. And we never went to the movies by ourselves. That was a faux pas. You did not go to the movies by yourself. You always went with a crowd of kids. So, and they were waiting for me, and I said, "I've got my friends are waiting for me. We're going to go to the movies." And he said, "He's sitting right over there." He said, "He wants to meet you." And I said, oh, okay, fine. So he takes me over and he said, this is Frank ONeil, and he's an FBI agent, new in the office here, and the other guy was an FBI agent too. But I knew him from other dinners that were held at this annex that we had. So he said, well, you got up and sang for it. He said, I wanted to thank you for singing for us. He said, that was very nice of you. And he said, I understand you cooked the food and you've served us very nicely. And I just wanted to thank you for that. And I said, fine. I said, I have friends waiting. We're going to the movies. Goodbye. And I left. Well, about a week later, John calls me on the phone. And he says, Mary Lee, he says, remember that young man you met at the dinner? And I said, oh, my God. I thought, oh, God, I don't even remember what he looked like. I said, what's he going to tell me? And he said, well, Peggy and I are going out to the movies, and he's going to go with us, but he would like to take you as his guest to the movies. And I said, oh, Judas Priest, And I thought, oh, God, I don't even remember what he looks like. I didn't remember a thing about Frank, poor guy. And so, of course, I was in college. I was, 20-something? We were 21, and he was 25 when he got married. So, was he 27? I don't remember anymore. But anyway, he was older than I was, and he was a new agent here, and then he got transferred to Denver. He was going to be there for 9 months, and then he was going to go to another place. So I said to John, I said, do I have to? And he said, yeah, he really wants to take you out. I said, okay. I said, but, you tell him that if he wants a date with me, he has to call me, not send you to call me and say if I'll go out with him. And he said, oh, okay, Mary. He said, Mary Lee, I'll tell him. So he called me about 3 days later. He called, and he said, he said, Mary Lee, this is Frank ONeil. And I said, oh, you're the guy I met at the dinner. And he said, yes. And he said, John says that you won't go with me unless I called you and asked you for a date. And I said, that's true. And he said, well, I'm asking you to go with John and Peggy and me for dinner. And then he said, I'd like to do that because you were so kind to us to cook that meal and then entertain us by singing for us and all that, I said, okay, fine. So we made the date for that Saturday. So I had to work. I worked and I came home and I took
Where were you working?
I was working across the street in the drugstore behind the counter in the drugstore. We had a bar, a Cokes and
right,
and
soda
milkshakes,
and
soda fountain, yeah. And I got made 50 cents an hour behind that, about that thing, making, And so anyway, so we went out. We had a good time, but when he came. He was in, and I was going with, my group were college kids. They wore shirts. They never wore ties. They never, khakis and stuff. And so he comes to the door and he's got a suit on and a white shirt and a tie and a hat. And I'm thinking, oh my God, he's too damn old for me. That's exactly. And Father Kolka, bless his heart, if you came down the back stairs, before you went down to go outside the building, Dr. Kolka had an office right here. And you go down the stairs, and there's Father Kolka. And he said, oh, Mary Lee, you're all dressed up. Are you going out someplace? And I said, well, I see him at the door. I said, I just met him, and he's invited me to go to the movies with me. And he said, well, go have a good time, And I said, okay, Father, I will. So then when I get to the door, and Father's still in his office, and I said to Frank, I said, you need to come upstairs and meet my mom and dad. I will not go out with you until you meet my mom and my dad. So we trucks him up the 3 flights of stairs, and he meets my mom and dad. He was very nice. He was very, and he had this accent. He packed his car and Harvard Yard. And I said, oh, God, where are you from? And he said, Boston. And I said, oh, okay. But anyway, so we went down and we got in the car with Peggy and John, and we went to the dinner, and it was nice. I mean, it was fun. We went to dinner and then went to the movie, and then he took me home. And from then on, But every time he would call and make an appointment with me to go on a date, he was very meticulous. And he always called me before. He'd say, "Are you willing to go out again?" And I said, "Oh, sure." So that, it got.
Now, how long did you guys date?
I met him in November, the end of November for Thanksgiving. At Thanksgiving, that's what we had, a Thanksgiving dinner.
What year was that?
Well, we got married in 1950, so that was 1949.
Oh,
And then in 1950, we got married on August the 5th in 1950. And yeah, but in June, his older brother, came out to see Frank and really, in truth, to meet me.
right.
And Frank would never own up to that. I said, "Your brother's just looking out for you." And he said, "Yeah," but he said, "I knew I was going to marry you." He told the guy, John, on our wedding day, John came up to me and he says, "Mary Lee, I have something I need to tell you." And I said, "Oh, God, what is it now?" And he said, "Well, remember the night you met Frank?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, when you left and went out with your friends, Frank turned to me and said, 'I'm going to marry that girl.'" And he did.